Today, I want to explain why and how I started teaching professionals to think like a company of one or to think like an entrepreneur. This isn't a framework or anything. This is just a story, and I want to share it with you. And if you've ever felt like, well, with the kind of things that we're going to talk about, this can really help you to break out and decide another future, right? So this episode is for you if you're in the corporate world and looking for a second alternative. Let's get into it. So the origin story of where the company of one came from. So I didn't create this. I mean, we always want to say we create things and out of just a moment of brilliance, but no, usually it's a moment of frustration. I was sitting here trying to run an entrepreneurship program inside of a university, and I was working with corporate professionals. Most of them are tech based, and they had lots of experience, lots of knowledge, and we were trying to show how do you start a company. And I was just watching them wrestle and struggle with this. They didn't think they were struggling, but me and other people with entrepreneurial backgrounds that were on our team, they were like, they're not getting it. They're not understanding what we're trying to do. So, I mean, what was happening is they would want to bring in their big company thinking, right? They would want to sit there and think about what was going on in the big company and how they could translate it to the business thing. For instance, they're used to, if you work for a company, you're used to long processes, you're used to lots of email, you're used to lots of meetings, endless meetings, you're used to planning things from step to step to step, and absolutely no experience with real sales and marketing. I mean, they might have worked with some of those teams, but their life was in the tech sector, and that's how they thought about things. And they even would think about things at like features on products instead of the benefits to customers. And it wasn't that we couldn't tell them that. These were smart people. It wasn't that we couldn't tell them that. It's just they had no perspective. They had no insight, even though they thought they did. They understood the material. They're like, they could not apply it. And everything they did and they would present to us felt like a big company guy trying to run a small company, and it wasn't working. So we just tried something different. You know, one day I'm listening to some Earl Nightingale. So if you're familiar with the Strangest Secret, one of the old videos of Earl Nightingale. So this is like a 1950s or sometime era radio guy. So, but some awesome stuff. But I had listened to him and then found some other content by him. And one of them, and I don't remember the one, but he was talking about every individual is a company. Every single person operates as an individual company because we are getting paid for services, just like a company would. And every company could break down into 4 different roles: operations and marketing, and then research and finance. And I remember hearing that and thinking, well, that's yeah, I mean, that's for number one, that's very accurate. You see that idea expressed over and over again. But I think that's it. We need a framework to help these guys see their way out of corporate America. So here's what we did as we went to work. I mean, I just went to class and said, hey, here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to operate differently. Now on, let's not worry about the businesses we're starting. You are company X. Look in the mirror. That's the company. And who do you work for? Your employer? That's your customer. So let's get that framework right now in our head. So I just started there and said, your job is to operate a business by serving your customer, and not as an employee, not waiting for instructions, but you are the business. You've got to come up with, what does the customer need? What kind of services, tools do they need to get their job done? How do they value what you're doing? Marketing. How do you communicate to them? So we just started. We just threw this out and said, let's just, we're going to operate this way because I think this is more than the real world. And it was a weird moment that just everything just shifted. They suddenly were like, wait, you mean we're the company? And they started operating differently. I mean, it was that within an hour things changed. I had them map out. I said, okay, let's just stop right here for a minute. Let's forget all these things we're doing. I want you to map out now here, because I drew some diagram on the thing, what I draw all the time now, a company of one, that you're exchanging money for value, etc. And here's all you are. So I said, okay, map this out. Get a sheet of paper and say, how do you deliver value? Well, first of all, I had, what do you do? What do you do? What is your role? Don't use these big corporate terms. I don't care about titles. What specific things do you do to serve your customer? Your customer is your boss. Okay, so they write that down. I said, okay, now how do you deliver value? And that was a lot of question. Like, well, I do project management, or I do security, or yeah, but where's the value? What's the company paying for? What is the because if you're not saving money or earning money, you're not useful. So what are you doing? Are you saving the company money? Or are you earning the company money? What are we doing? And so we just asked really simple, basic questions. And it was funny because they couldn't answer the simple, basic questions about themselves, right? Because they're not easy. Let's be honest. These are not easy questions for the typical big company worker. What do I do and how do I add value? That's a tough one. But they struggled through it and they got something down. How do you make yourself visible? So, and that was, they were like, what do you mean? My boss knows what I'm doing. And it was another weird conversation. And these weren't like long conversations, but it was like, no, your boss doesn't have a clue what you're doing. It doesn't care what you're doing because he's stuck behind email. He's stuck in his own meetings. And so how you manage your career money. And that was a weird one that jumped us into the Dave Ramsey. Well, because there was a few Dave Ramsey fanatics in there and fans, and people had changed their financial structure through that. Other ones were the typical Americans that were often, they were just in debt up to their eyeballs, right? So think about that. That's part of your company. That's part of your company. The income you bring in from serving customers is company money. So what are you doing with it? And how do you track trends? So we started talking about what's going to eat your company. What's going to take you off the market because some new technology or something that happens in your company. What's going to happen? What do you see? What are some things you're concerned about? What are some things that worry you? Right? Think about the things that worry you. And we weren't trying to build a career framework. That had nothing to do with what I was trying to do. I was trying to communicate, guys, this is how you think about operating a company. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. Throw away all your stupid corporate buzzwords and that talk that nobody knows what the heck you said, but it sounds really, really great, but it means nothing. Let's just boil down to speak plain English. And that was a struggle for many people. So over this hour, or maybe 2 hours that we did this, things just started to happen, and we started seeing some impacts. People lit up. People started having conversations. They started talking about they started talking differently. And at the end, we took a break, and people came up and they were like, "This is why we are here." And I was like, what do you mean? And it says, I'm not here to get a master's degree. I'm not here to hang another diploma on the wall. I got a bunch of those. I'm not here for another certification. I'm here to change my thinking. This is what I'm looking for. And I thought, well, that's great. So we're hitting on something. It was a little bit disappointing to me because the whole point was not to transition their career. It was to help them to think like an entrepreneur. So we could move on to the project at hand, which is them starting a company. Well, that's it. I mean, have you ever done anything and you're sitting there and it's kind of working, but it's like, it's not working like I thought it was supposed to work? This is different. And so you're a little disappointed and frustrated. That's where I was. So people were saying, this is what I need. This explains everything, how we are feeling. That's what one girl came up to me. She said, this is exactly. I mean, a lot of things we had said, this is how I feel. And then, this is when we got, because I walk into these things and I am watching these professionals. Now, I'm teaching entrepreneurship, and that's what we're doing, but the picture and the mode in the room, if you've ever been in a group of professionals, there's the posturing. There's the talking about how cool my company is, sharing titles. There's the toughness, I'm cool, I do what I do. And yet there's also this underlying stuck. There's this emptiness there, and it seems like the bigger the company and the longer you've been there, the more you feel this. I did. I totally felt this, and so I could see it in them. They weren't just stuck; they were numb. I mean, on average, I would say 80% of them had this. I'm wondering what's the point in what I'm doing. I'm a cog in the wheel. All these things we say. They all had great salaries. They all had great titles on paper. They looked awesome. Their bank accounts were, at least the inflow was great. But there's an emptiness. There was I call it, because when it happened to me, I called it a corporate lobotomy, right? You got all the cool things, but you just feel like I'm numb. I can't think anymore. I can't think for myself anymore. I'm just waiting to be told what to do, right? So they'd had that. The creativity and the drive was gone, and it was showing up in their lack of ability to think like an entrepreneur. And I didn't realize, I knew all that was there, those symptoms were there, but I didn't realize how it was impacting them thinking creatively about their company and about what they were trying to do. But this simple shift that we did, and I'll say that we did, Earl Nightingale helped us, right? He wasn't even there. It was a simple shift, and seeing themselves as a company, it brought them back to life. The mood of not only the room that day, but the mood of the whole program began to change because these people were thinking differently. There was an excitement. They were exploring things. They were thinking differently. And it was subtle for some. Some just lit up immediately. They totally got it. Some struggled with it. But they were all moving in the right direction. Some did launch businesses, right? Some of these guys jumped out and launched businesses and very successful. They didn't need to. Many of them, though, started getting weird successes, like, hey, I'm doing these exercises, because we kind of went with it, right? We had a syllabus and a plan. We threw it away and said, let's kind of flow where it's going. And so we kept doing this exercise, and they started, well, how do I apply this? So we had them doing marketing exercises. Go talk to your customer. Right? A simple, basic marketing exercise that you would do for starting a company. Go talk to your customer or potential customers. And they would do that, and they would come back, and it would be eye-opening. And it's like these people had never, and I get it. I'm saying these people, but I was incorporated in that way, and I did that. They had never talked to their customer. They had never said, hey, what do you really need from me? Hey, what do you value? What am I doing that you feel is productive, and what do you think is not productive? Just what are you struggling with? What's not getting done? What keeps you awake at night? They just started asking these I call these grandma questions, the questions your grandma would ask you. They're stupid, obvious questions, instead of the big complexity things we go in there. Like, what's our strategic alignment for next year? Nobody knows what that stuff really means. So the key was not them starting a business. And this was the epiphany to me. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm trying to create an epiphany for them, but it starts to me. I realize that I was going about this wrong, and I was addressing the wrong problem. These people needed to think like businesses. They needed to think like they were the company. They needed to think like a company of one. And when they started to do this, and they started to act like one, so they had the epiphany on day one, but it did take a couple of pushes, right, as we went from the various days in the program, giving them assignments to go talk to their customers, giving them assignments to How do you show up and market yourself better? How do you show up to your customers? How do you remind your customer what value you are adding? They were simple assignments because we want to add value, but we don't want to look like the used car salesman. We want to celebrate what we're doing, but not say, "Hey, look at me, I'm doing obvious," which is annoying to everybody, including your peers. How can you do these things effectively and professionally and still move the needle, if you will? So that's how the Company of One began. It was a pure exercise in frustration, right? I mean, it was so frustrating because this was like my second or third time, probably my second time teaching this material. I don't know, maybe it was more than that. And it was always dry, boring, and entrepreneurship should be anything but dry and boring, right? It should be exciting, and that wasn't the way it was. So, so let me step back real quick though. That was what we were doing, but most professionals have this pain. And now this may be you. And this, I would call it a quiet frustration. You've heard of quiet quitting, right? We talk about that, a quiet frustration. Because when I would ask a lot of people, and maybe if I ask you, hey, how was your job? It's good. Everything's good. Are you stuck? Some people would say, yeah, I'm stuck, but I've got a plan, or I'm stuck, but it's because of this. Things out of my control, right? But many of them would say they're good at what they do. They work hard. They hit deadlines, but they don't feel in control. They don't really feel in control, but they also think that's kind of normal, right? They're not supposed to feel in control. They feel like their income is capped. Like, I've got this pay scale and I got to get to this, and then maybe if I get a promotion, I'll have another pay scale. And there's this cap, and it's, when you look back at it, you're like, well, these are arbitrary, sort of. It's HR set, it's lawyer set. Do they mean anything really? Not really. Can your company move your salary double, and will it affect anything to the company? Probably not. It'll be a blip to most of your companies. When you start thinking about it like that, it's just so much of your pay, they feel like it's capped, and they feel like there's this locked in, and even if they went to another company, there's just a different cap. And they don't, an entrepreneur would never think that way. They're like, there is no limit. There is no limit to the amount of money I can earn. And no agency is going to put a cap on me. And they also would think that their future is kind of tied to approval. Everybody needs to approve of me. My boss needs to do good. When I get a new boss, well, I got to shift gears and think about how does he or she need me to show up, and what does that look like? Most people want more, but they don't really want chaos, right? The idea of quitting and starting something new, it sounds chaos, and quite often can be, especially if you do it wrong. But they want ownership. I started realizing that there's a phrase that so many people won't say that doesn't mean what they say it means. They say, I don't really mind my job. And I think what they're trying to say, and what they think they're saying, is, my job's okay. I'm making good money. I got a great title. My business card looks good. My family respects me. Other people in my church respect me. Whatever. But when they say, I don't really mind my job, I've learned that underneath that is, I am screaming to get out. I mean, I'm serious. I started realizing that is just code that we are taught to say. And I realized that that's how I was in the corporate world. And you get stuck in these things, which is the definition of stuck. You don't even realize you're stuck. Because you're using socially and corporately acceptable terms to describe how you feel. People aren't usually going around like, I hate my job. I want out of this with every part of my being. I mean, sometimes they'll say that, but usually they're not going to say that corporately or at a graduate program. and a lot of times we do things like we blame it on the company or the boss. Hey, my boss is terrible. My company's terrible. They got all these policies. I mean, the conversations, and this happens every time I meet with a client. The conversations is, how can I help you? And they spend the next 45 minutes explaining to me what's wrong with their company, the policy decisions they've made, their boss is a jerk, or maybe their boss is just a poor leader, or whatever's going on. They just have all this stuff, and you're like, but what do you want to do? Where do we want to go? You're just rehashing the past or how you feel. But that's how they feel. And that's stuck. So when you're finding yourself doing these things, you're stuck. And I've come to realize, when I was stuck, I would not have used that word. I would not have said I'm stuck. I would have just thought I hadn't figured it out, or I would have thought this is just the way it's supposed to be, and this is how life is. And if I go find another job, it's going to look very much the same. And for many people, that's exactly what they do. And you're just that's the environment that we were set up in when we went in there and presented the company of one. So, all right, that's where we got. I want to just throw this at you now. Let me just throw this to you and give you something like you're in this class, right? If you have a day job, if you have a corporate job, if you have a job that's paying you money, I don't care what it is. You can work for McDonald's, or you can work for Apple as the vice president. I don't care what your job is. But a lot of people are saying, how do I move up from here? How do I make more money? Right? But maybe the question we should be asking, actually not maybe, let me just go with, I'm pretty sure the question we should be asking from every level, from the success level and from the serving your customer level, is how do I serve and what value do I create? The same questions that we asked them that day. How do I serve? Who do I serve? What value do I create? Can you write that down on paper? And I'm serious. Can you write that down on paper? Can you take a pen and paper or go to a Word document or something and write down in one sentence, here's what you do. I serve John. He's head of customer relations for this company. And here's what I do for John that serves him, because this is the customer, right? And what do they value about what I create, about what I do? What value do I bring? Remember, there's two things that are value. In the end of the day, we're all measured by a monetary value. Do you bring more sales to your company? Or do you save your company money? Now, for most of us, I'd say 90% of the jobs in the United States, at least, and probably in the world, those are the two questions you'd better have an answer to. And most of us don't. Right? Because that's what they're measuring you by. The bottom line, that's what they're measuring you by. You see, employees don't ask these kind of questions. Employees, that group I was talking to, they don't ask this question. Owners ask these questions. And by thinking company of one, you start thinking that way, you immediately change seats. You're no longer sitting in the seat of the employee. You're sitting in the seat of the owner. You happen to be the company. All right. So I didn't start teaching this again because it was catchy, or because I was creative, or because I was brilliant. I started teaching this out of frustration. Many of the things that bring you the most money, the most reward are going to be things that you find are frustrating, and you're trying to solve a problem, right? And you can probably think of some things in your past like that. I was watching smart people lose years waiting on permission that they didn't need, and was giving them a tool to get out of it. So if you ever felt stuck, you're not broken. And if you're feeling some of these feelings I'm talking about, and you're like, I'm kind of feeling numb, and maybe there's more to me, and maybe there's more to work. A guy told me the other day, he says, I've just come to the point that I realize work is just hopeless, and this is the cross we have to bear. It was, and this was I've had two people recently make statements similar to that, and both of them were really high paid people. And I'm just thinking, how sad. How I understand there's a moment. Every job has moments, but if that's your everyday life, it's probably not your job. It's probably not your boss. It's probably here, how you think about things. So if you are interested in an idea, if you're thinking there's something else out there for me, check out the Idea Engine. It's a free tool, a 20-minute tool. I'll give you some prompts and it'll help you think through ideas that would work for you. Now, they don't have to be starting a company because that's not made for everybody, but some ideas for you of how you can create and add value. Check it out below.